Hello, I I welcome all the participants to this webinar on a very interesting topic on the criminal law FIR to charge sheet. Now we have our esteemed speaker Sri Ramesh Gupta ji, a designated senior advocate at Delhi High Court, to deliver a lecture or a debate on the interesting topic FIR to charge sheet. Firstly, I would like to introduce myself. My name is Rajendra Prasad, a partner at A&M Global Office of Bangalore. A&M Global is a full-fledged, full-service law firm, having its office at Delhi, Mumbai, and Bangalore, and having vast commercial practice. We decided to host a webinar on interesting topics involving senior advocates and legal luminaries for the benefit of the bar, young members of the bar, so also the other senior members of the bar. In that context, we requested Mr. Ramesh Gupta ji to deliver a lecture. He gave us a wonderful topic, FIR to charge sheet. Initially, many of the people have asked me, what is this FIR to charge sheet? I have said it's a journey. It's a journey for every criminal lawyer, be it the investigating officer or the defense lawyer or the prosecuting lawyer or even the judge. It's a journey. It begins from FIR to the charge sheet, and the way in which it is maneuvered. A defense lawyer who maneuvers this process of investigation succeeds mostly in most of the cases. I will briefly, before requesting Sri Ramesh Gupta ji to deliver the lecture, it is my honor and privilege to briefly introduce about him to the august audience, about the background, the experience of Sri Ramesh Gupta ji. Sri Ramesh Gupta ji completed his LLB graduation from Law Faculty of Delhi in the year 1975, 9th April 1975, and thereafter he was designated as senior advocate, Delhi High Court in the year 2009, April 2009. He has been practicing at Supreme Court of India, so also Delhi High Court and subordinate courts for the last 45 years, representing both the private parties as well as the government, and almost in thousands of criminal cases within and outside Delhi jurisdiction. He is a very well-known criminal lawyer, more especially in Delhi. Most of the lawyers, or almost all the lawyers in Delhi, know about him, must have heard about him. But to the rest of India, of course, he is well known. To the rest of India, I'll just give a glimpse of what are the matters that he has dealt with so far and what are the matters that he has been dealing currently also. With 45 years of illustrious experience, he has handled various high-profile matters. We have just been able to take out few from the library, or that I will only cover few of the important matters. He has handled a renowned case which is very well known in Delhi, the BMW hit and run case of Sri Sanjeev Nanda, and Upahar Cinema case wherein there was a fire in the Upahar Cinema. Ansal brothers were involved. He has represented them to defend them. So also he has handled Rahul Mahajan's drug overdose NDPS case. Rahul Mahajan is a son of a very well-known former politician. Thereafter, he has also handled defense for Commonwealth Games India scam case, and also cricketer Shoaib Malik's case when he was here. He has defended him. So also he has defended defamation case against Sri Digvijay Singh ji filed by Sri Nitin Gadkari ji, and currently he is also handling various high profile matters. Of course, any high profile matter in Delhi, less said the better. Any high profile matter, criminal matter in Delhi, first goes to Sri Ramesh Gupta ji for opinion, and this one. He is currently handling IPL match fixing cases and coal block allocation case of Jindal Power and Steel, 2G Spectrum case. He was instrumental in enlarging Sri A. Raja on bail. Leak Gate scandal, Reliance executives are involved, he is defending them. And National Herald case involving Srimati Sonia Gandhi ji is defending none other than the president of Congress party. And SFIO, Bhushan Steel matter, is currently handling all these high profile matters. Now, the versatility of a senior advocate, or rather, comes not just in the practice that he has involved himself in for the last 45 years. What is his contribution on the social side, on the social service side? He is very actively involved in the welfare of advocates. He has been the chairman of Bar Council of Delhi in the year 2006 to 7, the president of New Delhi Bar Association between 1995 to 96. He was elected council member, Bar Council of Delhi from 1997 to present, for the present between 2018 to 2023 term of 5 years. And he is also elected senior member, Delhi High Court Bar Association. He is also a member governing body, Sri Aurobindo College and Motilal Nehru College. He is also president of Bachpan Bachao Andolan, an NGO whose chairperson Sri Kailash Satyarthi ji was co-awarded Nobel Peace Prize in the year 2014. He has been the chairman Nimrana Education and Research Charitable Trust. He is a member executive council of National Law University, Dwarka, New Delhi. He is also an honorary professor of law, Amity University. He is also honorary professor of practice, Vivekananda Law School. And notably, with this illustrious career in his long experience of 40 plus years, Ramesh Gupta ji's service to the society, so also the service to the legal profession was recognized, and he was awarded in the year 2009 National Law Day Award, presented by the Honorable President of India, Mrs. Pratibha Devi Singh Patil ji, for outstanding contribution to the system and practice of criminal law, and also as a fearless advocate for the rights of under trials, standing for the rights of under trials, whose rights, personal liberty, has all been protected for the last 45 years of his illustrious career. I take this privilege, and it is my honor to welcome Sri Ramesh Gupta ji to enthrall us with this wonderful unique topic, FIR to charge sheet. The journey begins now. I request Sri Ramesh Gupta ji to address and enlighten us on this interesting topic. Thank you so much, sir.
FIR to charge sheet. For any criminal lawyer, either trial court or appellate side, this is the most important provisions of CRPC. Means section 154 to section 173 of the CRPC. You must have all read these sections, and you must have used this section also. But within the limited time, I'll briefly discuss with you these provisions and the law stands as on today. First of all, I'll say that the plain reading of these provisions is not as complicated as it has been made by various judgments of Honorable High Courts and the Honorable Supreme Court of India. With due respect to all the judges, I, with all sense of responsibility, say that the simple provisions have been complicated. I'll tell you how. But let's start from section 154. As we all know, that for any cognizable offense, if a complaint is made to a police officer in charge of a police station, then it is mandatory for him to register an FIR. What is FIR? FIR is reducing the complaint into a register prescribed by the state government under the CRPC. So they enter the information. See, it can be on the basis of a complaint of a private person, or it can be on the basis of his own, police officer's own statement that he has seen something which is cognizable and FIR should be registered and investigation continue. No investigation can continue without registration of FIR. What is cognizable offense? Cognizable offense is an offense which is mentioned in the schedule of the CRPC. All those offenses which are mentioned as cognizable offenses will be cognizable offenses. So controversy was whether police mandatorily should register an FIR as soon as they receive information or a complaint disclosing commission of a cognizable offense. Controversies were there, but ultimately Supreme Court, Constitutional Bench in Lalita Kumari held, yes, police can, before registration of FIR, can conduct preliminary inquiry into the allegations mentioned in the complaint. But they are not supposed to see whether truthfulness or veracity of the allegations are supported by some evidence or not. They have to just preliminary see in cases of matrimonial dispute, in cases of commercial disputes and all that mentioned there. So they must register an FIR. After registration of FIR, what is the right of an complainant or right of an accused to get the copy of FIR? Law says as soon as the FIR is registered, then copy of the same will be provided to the complainant. That's fine. But whether accused is also entitled to get a copy of the FIR or not, many judges and lawyers don't know that the accused who has been made an accused or a suspect in the FIR also has a right to obtain a copy of certified copy of the FIR. So for that, one can approach the Superintendent of Police or the court concerned and can request that he may be provided a copy of FIR. A lawyer can also, on behalf of that suspect or an accused, can file an FIR. Lately, Honorable Supreme Court Justice Deepak Mishra, I'll give the judgments, very specifically held that FIR should be now downloaded on the website. It should be made available to the public, rather. It should be in public domain, except if the FIR pertains to sexual offenses or rape cases or sensitive cases where integrity of state is involved, and the DCP will decide whether this should be uploaded or not. So now, mostly all over India, FIRs are available on the website. So accused also has a access for that FIR. But even if accused is involved in a sensitive matter and all that, he can still approach the court for getting a copy of FIR. So you may note down the judgment. Youth Bar Association versus Union of India. Writ petition, criminal 68/16. So guidelines were given by the Honorable Supreme Court, in which it was mandated that FIR should be made available. I'll stop there only. Now, another judgment of Honorable Supreme Court is available. Hemant Yashwant Dange, D-H-A-G, Dage versus State of Maharashtra. This is Criminal Appeal 110/2016. So Honorable Shiv Kirat Singh delivered this judgment and mandated that it is open to the magistrate to direct police to register FIR, even where magistrate does not so explicitly words but directs for investigation under 156(3), the police should register an FIR because 156(3) falls within the chapter. So I'll come to that later also when I read section 156(3). So registration of FIR says mandatory. Now, another important thing is, after 154, if your complaint according to police doesn't disclose a cognizable offense and they say it is a non-cognizable offense, so under 155 they'll give us a copy of the DD entry. We can go to the court and directly file a complaint, or in a matter the police can also request the court that it is a non-cognizable offense, we want to register it. So with the permission of the court, they can investigate a offense which is non-cognizable, but in that they cannot arrest a person without warrants. Now, if police fails to register an FIR, what is the remedy available? We are complainant. Earlier, you would remember that if police was not registering an FIR, we were straight away going to the Honorable High Courts under 482 for directions for registration of FIR. But Supreme Court in a judgment, we all know, Sakari Basu versus State of UP, 2008, 1 AD, Criminal SC 85, very categorically directed that if police fails to register an FIR, then instead of rushing to High Court, you move the concerned magistrate under powers under 156(3), and then if court is satisfied, the court may direct police to register an FIR. But there is a difference. Whereas 154 is mandatory for the police to register an FIR, but it is not mandatory for the court to direct registration of FIR, because word use is may. And another important thing is 154 police can register an FIR even if that officer has no jurisdiction of that police station. Still he can register an FIR. And that investigation cannot be challenged. But the magistrate can only direct registration of FIR if the complaint discloses jurisdiction of his police station and may. Otherwise, the judge has option to consider that complaint under section 200 and ask the complainant to proceed as per provision of 202, and ultimately judge may summon as a complaint case. So that is a difference, that you can't insist the magistrate, no, it is a cognizable offense, therefore you are supposed to direct registration of FIR. That is the difference. Rather, now consistent view of the judges are that it is only in case where investigation, a serious investigation is required, where complainant is unable himself to produce evidence in court under section 200, only then the court may direct registration of FIR, because there is a provision of section 202 also. So if there are certain evidences which complainant cannot bring, the magistrates can direct under 202 the police to inquire into the matter and bring that evidence. So therefore, there is a little difference between 156(3) and 202. 156(3) is a post-cognizance stage, before cognizance is taken. 1202 is a post-cognizance stage. So that is a difference. So 156(3), as I said, it is not mandatory for the judge to direct FIR registration, whereas 154, but question may be asked, if it is mandatory, and yet if police doesn't register an FIR, so Supreme Court says you go to the magistrate, he may direct, he may not direct. So then what action we can take against a police officer in not registering a FIR? So far, I could not find any judgment of any High Court or Supreme Court that in that case, SHO should be hauled up or should be prosecuted for not registering a FIR. I could not find anything. But another gray area is in a preliminary inquiry. When we file a complaint under 156(3), the judge asks for the status report. Because if police doesn't register an FIR, then first we have to make a complaint to DCP. And then to the court, we can't straight away come under 156(3). So normally judge will ask for a status report that what you have done on the complaint. So normally police officers come and say that they could not find any cognizable offense on the basis of complaint. So therefore we are not investigating and we have not registered the FIR. And when judge says, no, you register an FIR, then they register an FIR, then they suddenly arrest an accused. What was the change of circumstance? Why police officer should not be hauled up when he says no offense is disclosed? As soon as judge directs offenses, you register an FIR, then he arrests a person. So that is a misuse of section 153. I'll stop here only because time is short. Sakari Basu, when we read, there is another important section, important. In Sakari Basu, Supreme Court said that it is not only that the magistrate can direct registration of FIR. The judge can monitor the investigation. Earlier law was judge cannot interfere in the investigation, right? But Sakri Basu said that judge can monitor investigation. Means what? That he can supervise investigation. So when a FIR is registered rightly or wrongly, as a defense counsel, we are aggrieved. So we can also approach the court under 156(3) that police or complainant has not disclosed full facts. These are the full facts. You see to it that police also investigates these aspects. And then truth will come. So you must note down another judgment. Sakri Basu, we all know. Now, Babu Bhai versus State of Gujarat. In Babu Bhai versus State of Gujarat, 2010, within bracket 3, LRC 362, Supreme Court. Honorable Supreme Court held that fair investigation is a hallmark of criminal justice system. It is not only the complainant. Accused also has a right of fair investigation. It is the duty of the IO to bring all unvarnished truth on record, either in favorable to the accused or to the complainant. So with the aid of these two judgments, we can always approach the court and request the court for fair investigation. In so many cases, we have seen that police will only investigate the matter according to the complainant wishes and will not bring any evidence which may very categorically support the accused. For example, there is an allegation of rape that at particular point of time in that hotel, the accused took me and then forcibly committed sexual assault on me and all that. Whereas accused has evidence that on a particular time, he was not present there. He was at some other places. He has evidence of his location chart or other things also. And police won't investigate. But if we move an application in the court and give the details of documents and all that, and the judge can ask them, okay, why don't you investigate this aspect also? So he can monitor investigation. So this is Sakri Basu is very, very important when he said that court can monitor investigation. So we must take note of this, that investigation can be monitored by the court. Now, as you all know, FIR, we are still on FIR. So Lalita Kumari, as I said, versus Government of UP, 2014, 1, SCC Criminal 524, laid down the parameters where police can conduct preliminary inquiry before registration of FIR. So we must, it's a constitutional bench judgment. We must all read this judgment, which is very important. And then there's one judgment. Incidentally, I was the counsel in that. Ramesh Avasthi versus State of NCT Delhi. Criminal MC 666/2017. In this judgment, the Honorable Delhi High Court Justice Mukta Gupta relied her own judgment, which is mentioned in para 3, Nishu Wadhwa versus Siddharth Wadhwa. In Nishu Wadhwa versus Siddharth Wadhwa, 2 points were discussed. One was whether order passed under 156(3) is a revisable order, either directing registration of FIR or not registering FIR. Uttar Pradesh High Court, 3 judges, Father Thomas, it was held that it is not a revisable order. But Delhi High Court, in this judgment, Nishu Wadhwa held that it is a revisable order. Similarly, Maharashtra High Court, in Avinash versus State of Maharashtra, Manu, MANU/MH/2887/2019 held that order under 156(3) is a revisable order. So we must note down this judgment. We should not rush to the High Court. So it is a revisable order either. But only problem is, suppose the judge directs registration of FIR, and by the time the accused comes to know, he files a revision. In the meantime, FIR is registered. Then most of the judges say that, no, your revision is infructuous because we have no power to direct registration of FIR. Oh, sorry, quashing of FIR. So you go to High Court. So till date, I could not find any judgment of Honorable High Court or Supreme Court that even if it is a revisable order, even if FIR is registered and the revisional court district judge. He says no, order is bad, then FIR should also go. But so far I could not find any judgment. I'll stop there. And then jurisdiction. In Nishu Vadva and Ramesh Avasti, it was held that in Ramesh Avasti, a lady filed a complaint in East Delhi that she was molested in Noida and FIR be registered. So directions are issued for registration of FIR. So Honorable Delhi High Court said if no cause of action arose in East Delhi, then the magistrate of that jurisdiction cannot direct registration of FIR. So that is important. We must go through that judgment. Another controversy always was there. Can there be a second FIR for the same incident or allegations? Because for a same incident, there can't be two FIRs, but controversy was there. So we must all go through judgment of T.T. Antony. But Anju Chaudhary, ANJU, Anju Chaudhary versus State of UP, SLP Criminal 9457/2008. In this judgment, T.T. Antony, which is a landmark judgment on this topic, has been reiterated, where it was said that no second FIR can be registered for the same incident. However, relying upon Upkar Singh, it was held that there can be a second FIR if there is a cross version. Means for a same incident, there can be a cross FIR. Like two groups in a village have fought with each other, having firearms or lathis, and both the sides received injuries. Police get medical examination on both the sides. One side, one person dies. So on police registers a case 302-171 and arrest those. They also receives injury. Question was whether second FIR can be registered of the same incident. Answer is yes, because the other side has a different version. They say party A, whose person has died, they have exceeded their right of defense. They have caused injuries. They have entered our house and all that. We were not aggressive. So same incident, there can be a cross FIR. We must be knowing this point also. So we must, I think, read this judgment. This is very important judgment. Now, as far as 156.3, time is short. Question is whether a magistrate can direct registration of a FIR against a public servant if there are allegations that in the discharge of his public functions he has committed wrong and police is not registering a FIR, so therefore directions be made. So, and Rajendran and myself together did one case in Bangalore. That was the issue, exactly. But later, after that, Anil Kumar versus M.K. Ayappa, Manu/SC/1002-2013, Honorable Supreme Court held that magistrate cannot direct registration of a FIR under 156.3 against a public servant without obtaining sanction. However, in some other judgment, Honorable Supreme Court disagreed with this view in Madhu Surana versus State, but referred this issue to the larger bench. But as on today, the law is that no FIR can be registered against a public servant without there being a sanction. So I'll stop as far as registration of FIR is concerned. 156.3 is concerned. Now comes 157. After registration of FIR, police officer proceeds to collect evidence. He can, even after registration of FIR, can say, no, I don't investigate this matter because there's nothing in it. But I'll stop there. Now, most important section is 161, 162, and 164. 160, the police has powers to record statement of any, ask him to come and give statements. So 161 is a provision in which police records statement of any person who is acquainted with the facts and circumstances of the case pertaining to the investigation. the statement is not to be signed, and 162 limits the use of 161, and 164 where statement or a confession is recorded before a magistrate by a magistrate. Misgiving is among us is 164 CRPC statement before a magistrate has a greater value than 161. The value of statement under 161 or 164 for that matter is limited for the purposes of whether charge has to be framed or not, or trial should proceed. They cannot be used as a substantive evidence. Similarly, FIR is also cannot be used as a substantive evidence. FIR is also a previous statement. FIR also, as I said, is also containing previous statement. It is not a substantive. Similarly, 161, 164 is not to be used as a substantive evidence. 162, 161, 164. So, but with this, if as a lawyer we have to read section 145 Evidence Act as well. So I won't discuss today 145, but we have to, as a criminal lawyer, read 145. So purpose of 161 is as mentioned in 162. If you permit me to read, I will read for a minute, because this is very important section. No statement made by any person to a police officer in course of an investigation, if reduced in writing, be signed, nor shall any such statement or record thereof, whether in a police diary or otherwise, or any part of such statement, be used for any purpose, save as herein after provided at any inquiry or trial in respect of the offense. So it is only used for confronting a witness from previous statement as per section 145 Evidence Act. But most important thing is 164. Basically, 164 should be normally used for recording a confession. But normally what police do, they get recorded statement of minors or girls for offenses of sexual assault, etc. But even 164 statement cannot be used for any other purpose except for contradiction and confrontation. Many times lawyers do confuse. Suppose in a trial, a magistrate comes and exhibits a statement under 164 CRPC. But the person who gave that statement under 164 has not appeared in court at all. So what would be the value of 164 statement at the conclusion of trial? Answer would be 0. It will not be read in evidence unless the person comes and deposes in the court. Then his statement 164 is a previous statement. The defense can confront him with that statement. So we must understand it has a limited purpose. One very important aspect is, because time is limited, when we can use or take benefit of any improvement, omission, or contradiction in a statement under 161 or 164. Only then, when you, as a defense lawyer or as a prosecutor, when you declare a witness hostile as a complainant, when you have confronted with those portions which are either improvement or contradictions or omissions. There is a controversy about omissions. So I'll that's it by saying omissions which are major omissions which go to the root of the prosecution case, then omissions are also relevant. Subedar Singh, I think, is a judgment of 1956. I'll refer to that. So one can read that judgment. So we have to, unless we confront the witness with his previous statement, we cannot subsequently say, no, the court, that he has improved upon his statement. Like in the police, he says that ABCD came to my house armed with lathis, and A gave me lathi blow and I received injuries. In the court, he says AB came with lathi, C was having an iron rod, and all of them gave beatings to me. So unless he was confronted with the previous statement that B and C were also not armed with iron rod, so you have to confront. Then you can make use of it. So another important aspect which we normally forget at the end of the trial is, unless the investigating officer is also confronted with those portions of the statement of those witnesses, either by the prosecution or by the defense, even then we cannot take benefit of that. That's the most important thing. Normally, we only say to the IO, no, you have wrongly recorded the statement, or you have not correctly recorded. Similarly, PP says, you have not correctly recorded the statement. No. Each portion of that statement of a witness, which was improvement or omission or contradiction, we have to put to the IO. For that, a very important judgment I would like all you to read is V.K. Mishra versus State of Uttarakhand. Criminal Appeal 1247/20112. It was delivered on 28th July 2015. Para 14 and 16 relevant, but according to me, it is relevant and we must read all. What is the purpose of 161, 162? And another important judgment is Utpal Das versus State of West Bengal. Criminal Appeal 800/2007. It was delivered on 7 May, which is according to a written judgment, and misgivings about 164 statement can be reduced if we read this judgment, especially 13 number, but we must read the entire judgment, but I'll read. Likewise, statement recorded under 164 CRPs can never be used of truth of and corroboration of a witness who made it. The statement made under 164 can be used to cross-examine maker of it, and the result may be to show evidence of a witness is false. In the present case, it was for the defense to invite victim's attention as to what she stated in the FIR and statement under 164 for the purposes of bringing out the contradictions, if any, in a statement. In the absence of the same, court cannot read 164 and compare this with the statement. So this is very important. So we must all read this entire judgment. Similarly, another judgment, according to me, there may be so many judgments. So, but Ramesh Singh, alias Poti versus State of Andhra, Manu /SC /278/2004, para 6. The Supreme Court rather said 164 statement is a suspect statement. It has even lesser value than 161. However, learned counsel appearing for the appellant contended that in view of the fact that statements of PW1 and 3 were found to be necessary to be recorded under 164 of the court, that itself indicates that it is not safe to base conviction on the evidence of PW1 to 3. So read this judgment. It has discussed the other judgment also, but it says 164 statement has no substantive value. It is also a previous statement. Another landmark judgment which all must have read while we were in the colleges is Palak Narayan Swamy. Though this judgment is basically for dying declaration and other things also, but this is, I don't know the citation, 1939, BOMLR 428. But this is a landmark. It is a piece of literature, I will say. But para 7. It is now necessary to discuss the question whether the alleged statement of the accused to the police before arrest was protected under 162 CRPC. The majority of the high courts have held that it has no application to a statement made by a person who at the time is standing in evidence as an accused person. The majority have held that there is no such limitation, that their lordship have been referred to the last 12 reported cases, all of which with others they have held. And they have to conclude that the words of the section lead to the conclusion that statement is not admissible even when made by a person ultimately an accused. Means, suppose a statement was given while investigation was going on, and later on the person has been made an accused. Will that statement be read against him? Answer, no. It will be hit by section 162 CRPC. So you can't read that judgment. I remember one judgment of Delhi High Court, Bashir Ahmed versus State of Delhi, 1983, within bracket 23, DLT 486. It's a very beautiful judgment written by Justice Amil Jain. It says, even if FIR is not registered and police takes a step in collection of evidence, anything said by intended accused will be hit by section 162. It cannot be read against him. So read that judgment also, because so I will rest as far as 164, 161 is concerned here itself, because another two important very sections, which I don't think I will be able to complete, but most important section is 167, remand. It is very important. Remand section. With the limited time, one important judgment was, everybody knows, CBI versus Anupam J. Kulkarni, 1992, AIR 1768. Controversy was whether police remand can be given after a accused is remanded to judicial custody. Answer was given by Supreme Court is yes. In first 14 days, the custody can be converted from judicial to police, police to judicial. But after 14 days of the arrest, custody cannot be converted to police custody under any circumstance. And a police remand is given, but the remand. So no remand can be given. So Kulkarni has decided one for all this issue. Now question was whether statutory bail can be given after a period of 60 or 90 days, as the case may be. There are so many judgments which say after, suppose 90 days are over, charge sheet is not filed and accused has not asked for the bail, then charge sheet is filed, then that right goes. It is a right you have to claim. But we must all read the latest judgment, Rakesh Kumar Paul. Rakesh Kumar Paul versus State of Assam. Manu Obligacy 993-2017. This is a full court, but by a majority, Justice I will again this judgment issue was that when 60 days will be applicable, when 90 days will be applicable. So minimum 10 years, minimum life and death, 90 days. If anything else, 60 days. Like 304B, minimum is 7 years. And life, 307, life, but there is no minimum. So whether it will be 60 days, 90 days, again, I with due respect to judges say, instead of clearing the controversy, the wordings are used in a manner that again the judges are confused. But according to me, they have laid down one thing. As soon as right has been accrued, It is a statutory right. And it is the duty of the judge to inform the accused that now a right has been accrued, so you produce bail bond or surety, I will release you on bail. It is the duty of the court. So therefore, there is a departure from earlier law which says, no, if charge sheet is filed, then your right goes. No, only thing is after, suppose you are released on bail, charge sheet is filed, then cancellation like any other ground will be available. But we must read this judgment as far as 167(2) is concerned. But it is settled law that if charge sheet is not filed, then bail has to be granted. But what is the misuse? Misuse of this section is they file charge sheet. The police will say that we are investigating this aspect also, but we are filing a charge sheet. So what does that mean? That means they have filed an incomplete charge sheet, investigation continue. What 173 is? Please read with me. It says investigation under this chapter shall be completed without unnecessary delay. Then it says as soon as it is completed, police will file a charge sheet and then there is a pro forma. So what is important is after registration of FIR to charge sheet, they must complete an investigation, then file a charge sheet. Otherwise, limitation is gone before 68 CRPC. You may file a charge sheet after 10 years in a murder case. There is no limitation of offenses punishable up to 3 years or more. But they file charge sheet because accused is his country in custody to camouflage his right of statutory fail. They file an incomplete charge sheet. For that, and there's some even charge sheet is mentioned, investigation is continuing. Some officers who are smart enough, they'll say, qua this accused investigation is complete, but they are investigating qua other accused. If there is an offense under 120B34, unless complete charge sheet is filed against all the accused, how can you say investigation is complete? So according to me, it is an incomplete investigation and then statutory right of bail accrues to the accused. But with due respect to all the judges, most of the judges say, no, we have taken cognizance. So therefore, right goes. We all have experience. Even after filing charge sheet, cognizance taken for 2 years, 3 years together, they don't file a supplementary charge sheet. Like they don't file FSL report. Suppose there is a case of forgery under 467. You don't file a report of expert. How can you frame a charge? What is the purpose of 60 days, 90 days? Purpose is that as soon as you file a charge sheet, supply of copies and state should come for whether charge is framed or not. But for 2 years, 3 years, accused lingers on. So, but in this, there are 2 judgments which are very important. That if incomplete charge sheet is filed, then bails were granted. One, the landmark judgment is by Kerala High Court as some Purtado, P-U-R-T-A-D-O, Purtado versus CBI, criminal MC 917 and 918 of 96. In this case, Honorable Kerala High Court said, no, if you are filing a incomplete charge sheet, investigation incomplete, accused has a right of statutory bail and therefore bail was granted. Similarly, Delhi High Court Justice Ravinder Bhatt in Tunde Gajaba, T-U-N-D-G-B-A-Z-A versus CBI, bail application number 215/207, relying upon this judgment, in very detail held, you can't take away the statutory right of an accused by filing an incomplete charge sheet. So therefore, accused, or you cannot even say that you cannot split a charge sheet. That this aspect we are filing charge sheet, as far as other aspect is concerned, we are still investigating. What does that mean? You have to file a complete charge sheet. So this is also a very important judgment. In Dinesh Dalmia versus CBI, criminal appeal 1249/2007, Supreme Court held that once cognizance is taken and police has filed charge sheet, then it cannot be said that a statutory right of bail is available. So whatever I'm saying is totally discarded by the Supreme Court. But in that judgment also, para 19, Supreme Court said, yes, that right of statutory bail is a valuable right and police should not be allowed to file incomplete charge sheets. so that valuable right is taken away. So it is at the stage of cognizance that the judges should take note that no, it is incomplete charge sheet, we cannot take cognizance or return the charge sheet, and then right of bail accrues to the accused. So as far as 73 is concerned, this will be very important. Another aspect is when a charge sheet is filed, the copies are supplied under 207 CRPC to the accused, and they only supply the documents which they rely. And suppose they collected so many documents which are beneficial to the accused or the defense, but they don't supply the copies. And the judge, the police is not relying upon these documents, therefore you are not entitled. Wrong. Supreme Court said no, even if during investigation they collected documents which are not relied subsequently, accused has a right to obtain the copies of that judgment, of those documents, even not read. You may note down Shashikala versus CBI. This is Jayalalitha's case. SLP within bracket criminal 4560/2012. In this judgment, Supreme Court, even at this stage of, I think, defense, accused demanded certain documents. Supreme Court said, yes, accused has a right to get the copies of all those documents which were collected during investigation. Relying upon this judgment, Delhi High Court in Ashutosh Verma versus CBI, Criminal Miscellaneous 79/2014, Justice Vash also held that accused also has a right to get those copies even which were not relied by the prosecution but collected during investigation. Please go through these judgments which are very important. Another thing is, if police files a cancellation report, what is the remedy available to the complainant? Complainant can file a protest petition. Rather, if a cancellation report comes, unless notice is given to the complainant or that matter of a victim, and he is heard, cancellation report cannot be accepted. And in certain circumstances, the court can treat the protest petition as a complaint case and proceed, and may allow the police to file a cancellation report. So 173, I think that will be important. Now, in 173, last, I will say the provision 173(8) is the most misused section by the police. Most misused. What it says, after filing of a charge sheet, police can further investigate the matter if new facts come to light and file a supplementary charge sheet. But in charge sheet, they say investigation is incomplete, and we are continuing investigation. Then it is not a new fact. If they file a supplementary charge sheet, it is a continuation of earlier charge sheet. Supplementary charge sheet means if new facts come to light after filing of charge sheet. But if they already knew a fact, and if they file charge sheet, then 173(8) should not be allowed by the judge. The controversy was whether the judge has powers to direct police to further investigate a matter after he takes cognizance, or complainant can also ask, or an accused can also ask. So controversy is going on. But since time is short, I will say the latest judgment of Honorable Supreme Court on this point is Vinu Bhai Hari Bhai Malviya versus State of Gujarat, Criminal Appeal 478/2017, date of decision 16/10/19. Justice Nariman in this judgment said, even after taking cognizance, though earlier judgment thought it is a 156(3) post-cognizance stage, pre-cognizance stage, but it says by virtue of 156(3), 173(8), even the magistrate has powers in some appropriate cases to direct further investigation. So they have now changed the entire law, though only few months earlier, Justice Deepak Mishra in Amrut Bhai Shambhu Bhai Patel versus Shambhu Bhai Kanti Bhai Patel, 2017 for SCC 177, 2nd February 17, held that the power under 173(8) vests with the police, and the judge cannot direct registration of filing of supplementary charge sheet or further investigation. It is only the prerogative of the police. However, now this situation is changed in view of this judgment. So I think with this limited time, I will conclude, because a few minutes I'll leave it to Rajendran for asking some questions. Hello, over to you.
Hello.
Rajendran.
Yes, sir. It was a wonderful lecture on FIR to charge sheet. I hope all the panelists and the participants benefited from this. Sir, I will ask myself one question. Now, coming to section 161, recording of statement by the police under section 161 and recording of statement by the magistrate under section 164. You mentioned, sir, that both are equal in status, but why do the IO, what is the discretion that the IO exercises in recording statement under 164 or under 161?
You see, 161 statement, IO has to record. This is mandatory. If he doesn't examine a witness and records his statement, and witness straight away comes to the court, then whatever he says will be improvement, unless he's proving only documents. If documents have been seized and he proves only the documents, that's a different thing. But if on oral evidence somebody says anything, it has to be recorded under 161. Otherwise, it will be for the first time a witness comes to the court and makes a statement after a few years. So it will have basically very lesser value or no value. 164, I said you already, it is the discretion of the investigating agency to produce a witness and request the court that his or her statement will be recorded in 164. The judge may refuse or judge may record. Basically, 164 is meant for confession, not for recording of statement of a witness. But normally police, if is a minor or a woman, produce him or her before the court and get her statement recorded, so that later on aspersions are not made on the police officer that he has wrongly recorded something like this. But as I again said, statement under 164, 161 is the status of previous statement. 164 also cannot be used for any purpose. It's not a substantive evidence. Even if a witness comes to the court, his examination in chief has been recorded. He says, yes, I made this statement before the judge. But he could not be produced for cross-examination, suppose he's died or unavailable. Then even his statement cannot be used for any purpose. It has to be discarded.
Okay. Now another question that I will have is, under 173(8), it is my experience also with your experience that in most of the cases, preferably by the investigation conducted by CBI and other cases, charge sheet is filed maybe to circumvent 167, and they give a report that it is initial charge sheet. We want to further investigate into some or the other aspect, and they keep the investigation languishing for 2, 3 years or 4 years at their whims and fancies. Now, what are the safeguards that are available to the accused? Accused, for example, has a case even for quashing. Now, unless the charge sheet comes, some of the high courts say, let the investigation is still pending, we cannot interfere for quashing at this stage. Now, can there be some provision, can there be an attempt to get a direction to see that the investigation is completed by the high court?
You see, no court has, under the provisions of CRPC, powers to direct an investigating agency to conclude investigation in a time-bound manner. So it is the prerogative of the investigating agency. Only question is, you cannot keep an accused in custody if you are not completing investigation. So to camouflage that, they file an interim charge sheet, I'll say, or supplement or preliminary charge sheet, which should not be allowed by the courts. But as I said, you see, courts have their own view of understanding the law. But defense, if accused is on bail, then fine. They may take few years to file. You see, one example I'll say, if on 88th day, see, I'll tell you, if on 88th day of arrest, accused is not released on bail, on 89th day, you will get the charge sheet. So that you don't get bail. But if on 89th day you get bail, they will not file charge sheet in 4 years. Means what?
Yes,
How can you then take 4 years to complete the investigation when in one day you complete the investigation? It is totally misuse of this provision, but with some day, some judge will deliver a judgment which will decide all these issues.
Thank you, sir. I will now take the questions from important questions our participants have asked. I hope several questions have come. We have around lot many questions. I will take a few questions and
Please.
Can accused respondent appear in 156(3) application? That is the question asked by one of the participants.
Yes, yes.
That can an accused appear?
What is happening is, as I told you, even at this stage, it is settled law that accused or intended accused has no right to participate. Like in a complaint case, till accused is summoned, he has no right to participate. But as I said, even at this stage, accused can move an application relying upon Sakri Basu and Babu Bhai, that the court should direct the IU to investigate or inquire into these aspects also, which he is not doing. But that can be only after registration of FIR. But before registration of FIR, normally what strategy some lawyers adopt is they file an application under 340 in the same court that the complainant has done perjury and all that, so take action or initiate inquiry against him under 340 CRPC. So some judges take that 340 complaint along with 156 complaint and then together they decide. So it depends. So but 340, some lawyers adopt this practice. But otherwise I'll say that accused has no right to participate. But yes, since a complaint has been made to the police, accused can always make a representation to the police and can tell the police that he has not told you the correct fact or he has concealed certain facts. So it is for him to inform the IU about all these things.
What is the one question relating to case diary is asked. Now, the diary of proceedings in an investigation has to be maintained under section 172.
Yes.
The significance of case diary and the use of the same before the trial court.
It is a very good question. I incidentally failed to mention 172. It's a very important section which was amended. Kindly read with me 172 CRPC, which is part of today's 172 says, every police officer making an investigation under this chapter shall day by day enter his proceedings of investigation in a diary. I'll come. What was the amendment? In 2009. The statement of witnesses recorded during course of investigation under 161 shall be inserted in the case diary. 1B, the diary referred to in subsection shall be volume and duly paginated. Even after 11 years, even CBI, ED or Delhi police, they don't have case diaries which is volumed or paginated. They still use loose sheets, even not numbered. In so many cases, I pointed out this to judges, but they say it is procedural. They are not being supplied the copies, what they can do. So this earlier, see what they say, the record statement under 161 and attached with the case diaries. It says, amendment said it should be inserted in case diaries so that later on they cannot change 161, but don't insert in the case diaries the statements, only they say attached. So I definitely say that they again misuse, but no judge. We can only request the judge that at the time of remand that you sign the case diaries and you see that they are not paginated or numbered. So, but ultimately I find, and yes, since we don't have access to the case diaries, so how do we know what is mentioned in the case diaries or what is not mentioned in the case diaries? But sometimes as a good criminal lawyer, we come to know. So there is a judgment, Mukund Lal versus Union of India. So Mukundlal says that the judge, it is Manu SC 3221988. In this, Supreme Court said the court is the guardian of the justice, and court can always look into the case diaries. So the court has unfettered powers, and the court can always look into the case diaries whenever we point out or whenever required. So as far as case diaries are concerned, High Court rules also say that they have to be maintained, day-to-day proceedings have to be entered. But, and one more thing, the copy of the case diary every day is supposed to be submitted to a senior police officer. And then it has to be sent to VRK, which we call Criminal Record Room. But as far as Delhi is concerned, this system has lost somewhere, and nobody is submitting those case diaries in the VRKs.
There is a significant point, case diary maintenance by the IO. And there is one other question that relates to delay in lodging of FIR. What is the...
You see, there are few things.
Effect?
Delay, suppose there is a delay on the part of the victim or the complainant. He doesn't make a complaint immediately after the incident. And then FIR is registered after 1 day, 2 days. Then definitely law says, unless the delay is explained, it is fatal to prosecution. The veracity of truthfulness will be under challenge. But sometimes if delay is explained, then it is not fatal. But if a complaint has been made to the police and it is on the part of the police who have not registered the FIR, then police has to explain that they were inquiring into the matter. But law says, well, appreciating evidence, delay sometimes will be fatal, but not always.
But delay on the part of the complainant and delay on the part of the IO in registering the FIR.
Yes.
Now, you mentioned that. I am getting a question. In an incident wherein a rape victim is there is a possibility that victim might not be willing to give a complaint and other things. But evidentiary value, if the court finds that the delay is insufficiently explained, what is in these kind of matters?
Then you see, we have to revert back to Section 3 of Evidence Act, appreciation of evidence. So as I said, delay always will not be fatal to the prosecution, but in a very sensitive matter, the delay has to be explained. Why there was a delay? If the court is satisfied that delay has been properly explained, then it may not be fatal. Or there may be many circumstances together, 1, 2, 3. So this can be one of the circumstances always in important sensitive cases, like in murder case. If somebody says that PCR call is made that somebody has killed somebody, body is lying, PCR comes, then even after many hours after FIR is registered, so delay is fatal because we'll say that they were trying to manipulate the case, they were trying something like that. So it will be on the facts of each case. So we can't generalize that delay is always fatal.
Yes, sir. Thank you very much, sir. There are several other questions. I hope we are constrained by time, and everybody, after food for thought, I hope the participants and others are also in a rush for their lunch time. It is lunch time also. I wish to finish, and with a great sense of gratitude, I would like to thank you, sir, for delivering this thought-provoking lecture on FIR to charge sheet, the provisions and the various means and methods of investigation, the nuances, the loopholes, etc. for the defense, so also the prosecution. It's been a great pleasure. I thank you, sir, on behalf of all the participants, so also all the viewers, and on behalf of ANM Global team. It's been our pleasure to have you and hear a lecture from you. Hope we continue to do, dig out from your mind, from your wisdom, several other factors in the near future to come. Thank you. Thanks a lot, sir.
Thank you, Rajendran, and thanks everybody. I hope you must have utilized some part of the time you have spent. Thank you.
Thank you, sir.